right. So this evening we are here, and I'm still on the classic live streaming system of YouTube because their new system doesn't seem to work as advertised. I don't know why. It's very hard to figure out what you're supposed to do. And so I'm here, and I hope that you're able to see my stream this evening. Tonight I'm going to just start briefly by talking about this book, Translate This Darkness, The Veiled Woman in Jung's Circle, The Life of Christiana Morgan. Now, Christiana Morgan was a patient of Dr. Jung's in the late 20s and early 30s, and Dr. Jung did a 4-year seminar on the visions of Christiana Morgan. And just to give you a sense of the visions that Ms. Morgan had, she was quite an artist. And so in this book are a few photographs of some of the visions. And as you can see, these are quite dramatic visions. And so there is an entire separate two-volume series of Christiana Morgan's paintings. And I do want to look at those at some point, but I haven't been able to afford the books yet. But I'm reading this book, Translate This Darkness, The Life of Christiana Morgan, in order to prepare myself. And so one of the interesting things about this book is it gives a secret look into the life of a woman that was being brought up in high Boston society about 100 years ago. And so on page 52, I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here that sort of set the stage for you so you have a sense of it. So I'm on page 52. For a moment, however, Christiana could recapture the old thrill and find everything too marvelous for words, especially when the ball was fancy, when she looked beautiful, and when the attention she received approached what she experienced in the past. The temporary vivacity, though, usually came off with her ball gown, revealing an underlying sadness. Christiana's heart seemed no longer in the social world. It was just something to do for a season or so until a girl married. The social bribe for a woman's insignificance seemed increasingly hollow to Christiana as the sadly merry young group convinced one another of the marvelous time they were having, busying themselves with yet another ball, doing the same thing, dancing the same dances, saying the same things to the same people, night after night after night. Christiana wondered why her spirits were so low in a year that was supposed to be so wonderful, and were so low in a year and why she was finding so little meaning in her life. William and Henry James's sister had experienced a similar coming of age in Boston. Alice James blamed herself, but also attributed her misery in the terribly restrictive social stage offered a young lady in Boston. The stupidity and want of imagination of the Bostonians, whose highest idea of doing a pleasant thing for you is to ask you to meet someone you see every day. In her adult diaries, James recorded a turmoil and a psychic castration that resembled Christiana's generation and a half later. I had to peg away pretty hard between 12 and 24 I had to peg away pretty hard between 12 and 24, killing myself, as someone calls it, absorbing into the bone that the better part is to clothe oneself in neutral tints, walk by still waters, and possess one's soul in silence. And so it sounds pretty dreadful. Anyway, Christiana Morgan became quite a bit more high-spirited than that later on, and became kind of a anima muse for Dr. Jung and several other men during her lifetime. And she was quite the woman. And so I'm enjoying reading her, the biography of her, and then I hope to look at her visions later on. Okay, so tonight I'm making myself available to everyone to respond to questions that you may have or thoughts you may have. As you probably know, over the last few days I've been reading from this book, The Creation of Consciousness, Jung's Myth for the Modern Man by Edward F. Edinger. And I've read the first 3 of the 4 chapters into the channel already. If you haven't listened to those, I think you'll be surprised and want to, because it's very interesting what Dr. Edinger is saying, not only about religion, but about philosophy and about getting a meaning to your life. So it's an important topic. I hope tomorrow to read the 4th chapter and be able to post that. And so anyway, I'm going to again this evening talk about some of these memes that one of my friends and colleagues created some time ago, which have famous quotes by Carl Jung. And the first of them is the one that you see on the screen over my right shoulder. Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. And so if I can give an example in my own life, obviously the issue of masturbation is one that everybody has to face and think about at some point in their lives. And we have this current attitude that's running around some circles about what's called NoFap, which means no masturbation. And this has always been a bugaboo in my life because it was always something that was a guilt trip that young men were being put on. And I think that it's not appropriate to do that. And I think that one's sexuality is a part of our living self, our living body. And there's the old saying, use it or lose it. And so I confirmed this today with my physician's assistant. I had my physical today. I'm 72 years old and seem to be cooking along okay. And I said to her, well, is there any reason why not to? And I said, I think it keeps me young. And she said, yeah, you're doing pretty well, she says. And so this would be an example of something that few people would talk about publicly, but I'm not afraid to do it because I think that young men who are being persuaded into this NoFap idea are being led down the primrose path by people who want to control you. And so they want to guilt trip you. And previously that was the church. I don't know who is creating this so-called NoFap idea, but I think it's a pretty bad one anyway. So, Art, welcome. Hi, Skip. Saw the movie Rocket Man this weekend. There were a lot of scenes around inner shadow and the inner child. Great. That's good to know. Did I see that? I might have seen it. Maybe I didn't pay close enough attention to those things when I saw it. It was quite a while ago. If you're talking about the one that's like 15 years old. And Miles says, conscious is thinking and witness. And it generates transformation in the way I see Creator or God or Giver of life. Now I have a view that some are going to find inadmissible. I think that the key to Dr. Edinger's book is consciousness, and it helps us to transform and become adult human beings. And I've done quite a lot of thinking about Jordan Peterson's work, and I think one of the things, and by the way, Sean, thank you very much for your super chat there. I appreciate that. In terms of Jordan Peterson's work, I respect it incredibly because I think that what he's doing is offering a lot of guidance that young men don't get enough of these days and who haven't been properly fathered. And 50% of young men that have been raised in the last 30 years have been raised by single mothers, and so there hasn't been a father around in the house, probably. And that means that you don't get the same kind of upbringing that you would get if there was a father in the house. And I think a lot of the advice that Dr. Jordan Peterson gives is of the type that young men need. And so I think that that's terrific. But it's rather funny to watch Dr. Peterson squirm around the question of, do you believe in God, quote unquote. And so 2 days ago on Saturday, he published a video that was made in February during a talk in Australia about why he hates that question. And so I did respond to that video, and let's see if I can show you a link to the video, and you would also be able to see the response that I gave. Now, I'm now seeing that the stream health is once again quite poor here, and I think that that's somehow a function of what YouTube is doing. I don't know, and I'm not very pleased about it. It allows me to go ahead and make a YouTube or a video that I store on my computer, but maybe you cannot see what I'm talking about. Miles says, example, Art is saying Rocket Man is about Elton John. Okay, that's interesting. I haven't seen that one. Miles says, example, I will say I know Jesus Christ, and I will say he wasn't a Christian and isn't a Christian. Well, that's, if you want to stick people in the eye with that one, that's entirely your call. Anthony Roberts says, Peterson is the doorway to young men for the millennial generation. Well, yes, he is, but I suppose I have to read my response to Jordan, and let me see if I can find that, because I have some reservations, and so I did put them on this video of his yesterday, and he may not like them. Actually, he'll say, yep, you're right, Skip. And that's what I think will happen. And so I'll read this to you now. Let's see, I wonder if I can share the screen. Maybe I can do that. So anyway, the point is that Peterson likes to say that likes to imply that he's Jungian, but in my little response here, you're going to hear how I don't really think that's true. And so let me see if I can put this letter up on your screen for you so you can read along with me. Let's see here. Where do we go? These things are harder to find than a hound's tooth. Okay, except I don't think you're seeing that letter. Sorry about that. I'm not doing well on bringing this up. Okay, never mind. I will read it to you. So, here's what I said to Dr. Peterson, and you'll see why there's a little bit of a difference of opinion between him and me about what's Jungian. Dear Dr. Peterson, you really must reconsider your name dropping about Dr. Jung until you have grokked the essence of his work, which you evidently have not. You have incorporated a few basic Jungian concepts into your logos orientation of the world, but you have bounced off the essence of Dr. Jung's work and certainly the last 30 years of it. Dr. Jung wrote quite clearly in the first 2 paragraphs of the Red Book in 1915, 46 years before his death, and before most of his writing in the collected works, that his self, spirit of the depths, God image, has subjugated all my pride and arrogance to the power of judgment. He took away my belief in science. He robbed me of the joy of explaining and ordering things, logos. He let devotion to the ideals of this time die off in me. He forced me down to the last and simplest things. He took my understanding and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical. The essence of what Dr. Jung was saying is that his work at that moment became the opposite of logos. You have juxtaposed logos against chaos, but the problem with that juxtaposition, sorry, my vision is bugging me tonight. The problem with that juxtaposition is that in that chaos is your life. I prefer not to use the term eros because of its unsavory connotation in common parlance, so I'll prefer the juxtaposition logos versus life. That is a genuine That is a genuine opposite which Dr. Jung would endorse. You have put the feminine in the chaos side of your equation, but you have to admit that when a woman produces a child, it is inappropriate to suggest that the process is chaotic. It is perhaps one of the most ordered things that happens in the universe. In your speeches, you commonly denigrate fantasy, whatever you mean by that. But the truth is that everything in the room where you are currently sitting had its origins in fantasy. We need logos 100% to build a product, just ask Boeing. But every idea and every product was first a fantasy or envisioned in the mind of its originator. Even you were a twinkle in your father's eye. Dr. Jung studied and wrote about that side of the psyche. You write on the logos side. Leonardo da Vinci had it right when he said, "He who has access to the fountain does not go to the water jar." When you juxtapose logos against chaos, you do us all a disservice because in that chaos is life itself. After your students graduate from university and leave all of the professors and their theories behind, it is they that have to live their lives. Professors just go back to their words, logos, and their equally irrational lives. Your struggle with the logos idea of belief is palpable because you obviously stuck it in the logos. Dr. Jung explained your quandary quite succinctly in answer to Job, paragraph 751. God is an obvious psychic and non-physical fact, i.e., a fact that can be established psychically, but not physically. And then in paragraph 752, he stated clearly, it does not matter at all that a physically impossible fact is asserted, because all religious assertions are physical impossibilities. If they were not so, they would, as I said earlier, necessarily be treated in the textbooks of natural science. But religious statements, without exception, have to do with the reality of the psyche and not with the reality of the physis, the physical world. This is the essence of your suffering over your belief in God, because you want to think and talk about religion in the context of the physical world. Then you can mold it into the logos, which is your default position. Before you inappropriately mislead millions more with your one-sided commentary on religion and the logos, please get over being terrified about Ion, Volume 9-2 of the Collected Works of C.G. Jung, and grok the essence of what Dr. Jung was saying. As a way of approaching it, you might want to consider picking up a copy of the Ion Lectures by Dr. Edward Edinger. Dr. Edinger helped me grok it, and perhaps he can help you. I'll be happy to interact further with you on these topics at any time. I am not a mental health professional, and my IQ is at least 50 points lower than yours, but I will do my best to help you see where I think you are misleading a generation in a very dangerous one-sided way. Best regards, Skip Conover. So that's my straight shooting from the hip response to Dr. Peterson's video about talking about believing in God, which he says, I can't, how can anybody have the arrogance to say they believe in God? Well, Jordan, you need to do a little more study. Anyway, so Miles says, sounds good to me. Anthony, the other video he posted yesterday with Prager in regards to the question was very good as well. Okay, maybe it was. I didn't have time to look at all of the 3 videos that he posted, and I will do that. But I'm currently having this at least internal discussion between me, Dr. Peterson, and Paul Vanderklay, who's a theologian who has become fascinated with Jordan. And somehow we need to work out what the right balance is on these issues. And so Anthony says, and he's gone. I guess you might mean me. I hope that's not true. Brian Urbina says, thanks a ton for the Jungian content. I'm a young man who is getting deep insights prepping for my adulthood. Well, that's very good, Brian. And so I'm proud of you for spending the time. And let me just ask if people are still here. All right, so there's my point. And why am I getting this bad stream health? I do not understand this whatever. This says that my viewers are having minor issues. Well, good luck with that. I'm not seeing that anybody's interacting with me anymore. And that's not good. I'm not, let me just say for the YouTube crowd, I'm not particularly impressed with your live streaming capabilities right now. I'll tell you what, I'm going to discontinue the stream and then resume it in about 1 minute. I apologize for the inconvenience. Let me see if I can get it restarted.